Watch out! Right as my wife exclaimed that, a truck from the opposite lane burst forth in front of us. After screaming, "Oh my God!" the car we were in was blown away. I felt a strong and intense pain on my body, and at the same time, my consciousness faded away from there. A little later, a beeping sound echoed in my ears. It sounded like an alarm clock. Realizing I had a horrifying dream, I started the day off in a foul mood. I am Smith, who just had a gloomy morning. Mornings are always tough for me. Even when my alarm rings, I can't wake up easily. I slowly opened my eyes to stop the alarm, but all I saw was a plain, unfamiliar ceiling. Wait a minute. Shouldn't my ceiling have wood patterns? This isn't my home. I tried to sit up in panic, but for some reason it felt like I was paralyzed, unable to move my own body. A stranger, a woman I've never seen before, spoke to me. "Mr. Smith, can you hear me?" Barely managing a faint nod and blink to her question, the woman's face broke into a relieved smile and she said, "Doctor, Mr. Smith is conscious now." Before rushing off to fetch a physician, I wondered if it might have been the nurse. And when I looked in the direction of the sound, I saw that the beeping sound was the sound of an electrocardiogram. As I tried to gather my foggy thoughts, a doctor in a white coat approached, examining my body and asking questions. "Can you feel this when I touch here?" I weakly nodded, and he informed me that the car I was in had rolled over, causing a major accident. I had been unconscious for 2 weeks after being rushed to the hospital. That wasn't a dream. While I was still in shock, the doctor spoke again. "Considering the magnitude of the crash, it's fortunate you only have a broken leg and no paralysis. The rehab will be challenging, but let's give it our all." I wanted to ask about my wife, but my voice was hoarse and wouldn't come out clearly. "What's wrong?" the doctor inquired. With great effort, I managed to mutter, "My wife." And he responded, "We'll contact your family immediately." It seemed he understood what I meant. Unable to move freely, all I could do was lie in bed and anxiously wait for my wife, Michelle. Shortly after, my rehab began, taking into consideration my current condition. As the doctor mentioned, after lying down for 2 weeks, my body felt heavy. Moving freely was a challenge, let alone getting up. I never imagined ending up in such a situation. After rehab, as I was drifting off due to exhaustion, my mom rushed into the room, gripping my hand and shedding tears of relief that I had regained consciousness. But I couldn't find my wife. Gathering strength to ask, "Where's Michelle?" She told me she had been transferred to another hospital. When I inquired about her condition, my mom reassured me it wasn't too serious, which gradually eased my restless feelings. As I felt a sense of relief, I truly realized I couldn't imagine life without Michelle. I desperately want to hear Michelle's voice right now, but it seems both my and my wife's cell phones were damaged in the accident and can't be used. However, it's frustrating that I can't directly call the hospital where Michelle is admitted. And my mom would tell me that my first priority now is to do rehabilitation and get back to moving as soon as possible. I'm incredibly concerned about how Michelle is doing. If she's in a similar condition to mine, she probably can't answer the phone, but I'm still unbearably worried. To see my wife, I need to get moving and visit the hospital where Michelle is. So, with that determination, I pushed myself hard, continuing my rehab with the help of the therapist. Thanks to my hard work in rehab, I slowly began to sit up and eventually could move my body to a wheelchair. My mom got me a new phone, and I tried calling Michelle, but she didn't answer. Maybe she hasn't gotten a new phone yet? My mom said it wasn't a big deal, but I'm wondering if she's hiding the fact that Michelle's injuries are severe. When I pressed my mom for answers, she indeed turned away from me. I don't want to think about it, but she hasn't passed away, has she? I begged my mom to tell me the truth, and with a furrowed brow, she sat down beside my hospital bed and said, "Please, listen calmly." Then she revealed a shocking truth to me. Michelle's injuries aren't serious at all. I've been informed that she's already been discharged from the hospital, but, well, she wants to divorce me. She sent over the divorce papers. When I looked at the divorce papers handed to me by my mom, sure enough, in Michelle's handwriting, her name was there. This can't be true. It's impossible. I tried calling Michelle to ask for an explanation, and even though my phone is broken, it should still ring, but there's no sound at all. Watching me in distress, My mom said that apparently Michelle had been considering divorce for a while, but I never saw this coming. So lost, holding the divorce papers that trembled in my hand, my mom said she'd like me to fill them out, hinting that I might not be able to contact Michelle. I have no choice but to get better and go to her in person. Determined to see my wife, not just in the rehab room, but also at the bedside, I worked hard. 2 months later, I could walk on my own and was finally discharged. When I returned home after so long, I found that only Michelle's belongings were completely gone. Realizing that Michelle was serious about the divorce, I slumped to the floor. I felt so defeated and pathetic, but I knew I couldn't come to terms with it without speaking to her directly. I figured she might be at her parents' place, so I quickly headed there, just hoping that Michelle still has feelings for me. Praying deep down that she'd say she doesn't want a divorce, I hailed a taxi and rushed off. Upon arriving at her parents' house, I rang the doorbell, and my mother-in-law responded through the intercom. "Hello, mother-in-law. It's been a while. It's Smith. Is Michelle here? I really wanted to see her and talk face-to-face, so I came over." To which my mother-in-law responded with a surprised "what?" and told me that Michelle wasn't here. She didn't invite me inside, and further said that they were also in favor of the divorce and asked me not to come again. After that, just like with Michelle, I couldn't get through to her parents' house no matter how many times I called. For a while, I stared at the divorce papers, hoping for a call from my wife. But eventually, I came to the realization that she no longer had feelings for me, and I had no choice but to submit the papers. If only that accident hadn't happened, we might still be a happy and loving couple. But then again, my mom did mention that Michelle had been contemplating divorce for a while. Maybe after all these years, I just failed to notice Michelle's feelings. Losing her made everything seem bleak. Images of her cheerful smile and laughter would come to mind and then fade away. Would I never see that bright smile again? Or have those casual conversations with her? My dream was to grow old with my wife, but it was shattered. With a heavy heart, I returned to work, starting with shorter hours, gradually increasing to my usual workload. 6 months after our separation, I worked relentlessly to distract myself from the pain of losing Michelle. Then one day, when I finally got used to living alone, I finished work early, but didn't want to go home to an empty house. So I decided to go to the last stop instead of getting off at the usual station. It was a place more than an hour away from my home, and it was the first time I'd ever gotten off at this station. After all, there's nothing for me to be doing at home. Maybe I'll have a drink or two before heading back. While searching for a quiet place to have a drink, I stumbled upon a sight that took me aback. Passing by a parking lot, I saw Michelle walking arm in arm with an unknown man. Right here in public, being so affectionate. Was this the reason why she wanted to break up with me? Overwhelmed by shock, I saw Michelle, of all things, starting to hug the man. Suddenly averting my eyes, I heard the sound of a car engine. By the time I looked back, Michelle had already left in her boyfriend's car. Watching their car become smaller in the distance, I felt an overwhelming sense of loneliness. To be left behind in such an unfamiliar place, the weight on my chest. Seeing my wife cheating in plain sight, it felt like a storm was raging inside my heart. Maybe I should have talked to her. But we're already divorced, and doing anything about it might just be bothersome to her. I lost the motivation to find a bar, and all I could focus on was the asphalt sidewalk and a small flower bravely blooming there. Just staring at the lovely flower brought tears to my eyes. Pretending to wipe sweat, I used my hand towel to dab away the tears and kept my head down the entire time on the subway. The next thing I knew, it was raining, and there was a trickle of it running down the window. When I got to my usual station, as if mirroring my emotions, the rain began to pour down heavily. Feeling like crying, I walked home without an umbrella, getting completely drenched in the process. With this rain, I wished I could just vanish too. I didn't want to go back to that pitch-black house. But as I walked, for some reason I could see lights on in my home. I couldn't help but pick up the pace. Maybe, just maybe, Michelle had come back. In my haste, I unlocked the house and entered smelling delicious food. When I opened the front door and called out, "I'm home," I heard hurried footsteps approaching. "Oh dear, you're soaked. didn't you have an umbrella?" said a familiar voice. It wasn't Michelle. It was my mom who had come to cook for me. Clearly seeing my disappointed face, my mom asked what was wrong. I candidly told her about seeing Michelle today. After hearing this, she abruptly went to another room, made a phone call, and then came back with surprising news for me. "Go back to the place where you met Michelle tomorrow." I asked why, but all my mom said was that I would understand once I was there. She told me to see it with my own eyes. I wondered if she meant I should face the reality head-on. But after hanging up the phone, there was an unusual seriousness in her eyes that really bothered me. Though I was hesitant, I had the day off tomorrow, so I decided to go to the park, where I saw Michelle at the same time. And there they were, the man she was with yesterday, and Michelle. Today was the day. I would talk to her. If it didn't go well, I would put an end to these feelings. As I watched them, they headed back to the parking lot. Rushing over, I noticed something strange about Michelle. Why was my wife in a wheelchair? I'd heard her injury wasn't that serious. Maybe she felt my gaze because when our eyes met, she covered her mouth with her hand and looked utterly shocked as she whispered something. "What? Why? Smith, why are you here?" Upon hearing this, the man with her also exclaimed in surprise. "Smith, no way did you follow us here." He probably didn't expect to encounter me at a park that was over an hour away by train from my house. Yesterday there was no scar on the left side of her face, but there was a noticeable one on the right side of Michelle's face now. She quickly hung her head, using her hair to hide the scar, looking truly sad. The moment Michelle hurriedly tried to get into her car and stumbled, it reminded me of what I saw the previous day. They weren't hugging, Michelle was struggling to get into the car, and this man was just helping her out. I immediately approached, asking for an explanation, but my wife kept her head down, remaining silent. Feeling out of options, I asked about the man's relationship. With Michelle, he confessed everything. After that major accident, Michelle injured her spinal cord and became paraplegic. Despite her physical therapy, she realized day by day that she would be bound to a wheelchair for life. Moreover, a significant scar remained on her face. It turns out she was more severely injured than me and was taken to a different hospital. When she heard that I had regained consciousness, Michelle felt relieved, but believed that staying with me would only be a burden, so she decided to divorce. At that time, my mom tried to stop her from going through with the divorce, but Michelle was firm in her decision. If I had known all this, I would have never agreed to the divorce. When I told Michelle this, she finally opened up about her feelings. "I was the driver when the accident happened. I can't bear to face you after what happened. I don't want to be your anchor. I want you to find someone deserving and live a fulfilling life with them." She conveyed these feelings with a soft and strained voice. I can only imagine the pain she has gone through. Considering her feelings is heart-wrenching, the man who was with her is her cousin, named Daniel. Michelle was undergoing rehabilitation, not only in the hospital, but also practicing walking with Daniel, who is a physical therapist, whenever they had the time. But, I can't walk at all. No matter how hard I try, some things just can't be changed. She said this, tapping her immobile leg, a deep sadness evident in her expression. Could it be that my mom was on the phone with Michelle? When I asked, she said she hadn't received a call, but apparently my mom was calling Michelle's mom last night. The timing matches, and it's likely that our parents spoke. If that's the case, they probably want us to get back together. I told her I still love her, that my feelings won't change whether she's paralyzed from the waist down or has scars on her face, but she never agrees. I decided that all I could do was patiently wait for Michelle's feelings to change, so I asked her cousin Daniel to let me take over her rehabilitation. At first, she was hesitant, but over time, with dedicated effort, we started seeing results. Today, she was able to stand for a few seconds. "You're doing great, Michelle," I said, and memories from when we were a couple came flooding back. I knew I had to seize the moment. With all the courage I could muster, I finally poured out my feelings to Michelle. "Michelle, will you marry me again? Just having you smile by my side is enough for my happiness and contentment. Please think of it as saving me and marry me." As I held her hand and spoke, warm tears fell from Michelle's eyes onto my hand. I've missed this warmth. She responded, "Are you sure you want it to be me?" I hugged her tightly and said, "It has to be you." Sobbing, Michelle accepted my proposal. She probably wanted to cry for a long time, but had been holding back. "From now on, Michelle, let's live with half the grief. The gray, colorless days of my life have come to an end, and my life will begin to shine." We immediately went to Michelle's parents' home to get approval for our second marriage. My mother-in-law remarked, "Just as we thought, you too would come asking." Just as I had suspected, the person my mom was on the phone with on the day I reunited with Michelle was indeed my mother-in-law. It feels a bit strange to think our moms played Cupid in our love story, but I am nothing but grateful. The gloomy feelings have lifted, and it feels as refreshing as a clear blue sky. Michelle told me she felt the same way, smiling at me. Both our parents were very supportive of our remarriage. After we completed the paperwork, I took some time before asking Michelle to move back in. Before she came home, I made sure the house was wheelchair accessible, ensuring a comfortable environment for her. The days I spend with my wife are so lovely to me. Afterwards, I searched for a doctor to treat the scars on her face. We successfully set a date for her surgery. I've been told the scars will be barely noticeable, and Michelle is thrilled about it. I promised to protect Michelle for the rest of my life, hoping to heal not only the scars on her face, but also the scars in her heart.